Hi, and welcome to From Many People's Strength, the podcast that covers Saskatchewan news and politics, or politics and news. I always say it the other way. My name is Cory Johnson, and my pronouns are he and him.
My name is David Richards. My pronouns are he and him, or they and them.
Okay, so we got a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to say, it feels like old times where international news has sort of dominated the headlines, and sort of some of the Saskatchewan stories, fell under the radar.
Yeah.
That seems to have been a theme a lot since we've started this podcast. This week, maybe a little more than even usual, but it's Wednesdays in January seem to be days of excitement. It's always Wednesday. Right. Every Wednesday this month has been insane. So, but there's still a fair bit of Saskatchewan news that did happen. So, we can get into some of that.
For sure. I'm lucky that I have like Saskatchewan-based alerts coming at me all the time, because otherwise I'd probably miss all of this stuff.
Yeah, like I didn't sort of sitting down to prepare for the show tonight. I'm glad I set aside a little extra time this week to read over some things, because like I'm going through stuff. I'm like, I think I heard one bit of information ahead of time before I looked into stuff in more detail. The only thing that I did hear were was some of the pushback around the sponsorship, the fossil fuel sponsorship. And some of
the city council met on, was it Sunday or Monday? It might've been Monday.
Yeah, I think it was the 25th, whatever day that is.
Yeah. Ultimately they Sunday, backtracked on the ban on fossil fuel companies or energy companies.
And I had said last week that it had already passed, and it would have passed committee, was the story I had heard before. So they did vote on it, but they voted on it in committee. And then it came to the full council, and that's where it ultimately, everyone sort of abandoned it. But I hope all of these, free marketers who think, we shouldn't let our moral or ethical guidelines get in the way of the city earning money from advertising, apply that same ethical fortitude to all of the other things that aren't allowed to advertise on the city. So
well, that's right.
I know they're not going to. I know that's
because consistency is not a thing.
No.
I was following a Twitter thread on the evening of the city council meeting by Paul Duchesne from Prairie Dog Magazine, I believe. He did a great job. It was just amazing, actually. Like, sit there and keep up to date without having to listen to the whole bloody thing.
It's I didn't listen to it, didn't watch the tweeting live, but I sort of have followed up with some of what Paul has written. I really like Paul. I've been interviewed by him a few times for various things around the city, and I really appreciate his sort of approach to how he covers things. So always very fair. But it's, I can see both sides of it. Like we talked about this a week ago. It probably isn't cut and dry, but
the thing that I was a little like, I don't know that this was the move that, these people, like these councillors, wanted to take. I don't know that this is what their constituents wanted. I know that they felt a lot of pressure from other forces to make this change.
Yeah, and that's sort of where individual constituents within the city stepping up and saying, "Hey, we don't want this." In my mind, is a lot different from other levels of government dictating to the city what happens. But in the future, if we have an NDP provincial government and a more conservative city council, I am absolutely certain all of the people who stood up and said, "Oh yes, absolutely, the premier of a province should have all the right in the world to threaten and dictate to city councils." I am certain that they will hold to those values when there's an NDP premier dictating to conservative city councils what they can and cannot do within the city. Yeah, I'm absolutely certain there will be consistency there.
We can count on that.
Yeah. So that's fills me hopefully my sarcasm quotient for the
evening. It wasn't dripping enough. I don't know.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. So pretty. I don't know. It's frustrating. Yeah. To say the least, I guess.
Yeah. No, it's. And there's a level of hypocrisy within conservative governments at the provincial level who lose their mind when the federal government tries to influence provincial policy in any way, shape, or form, even if it's something that's under federal jurisdiction, and yet they themselves will start dictating municipal issues to cities. It strikes me as incredibly inconsistent and hypocritical, when it's at a level of, hey, I don't like this. Okay, I can live with it. And I can live with it when, at the federal level, a federal leader says, it's not my control. I don't like it. I'm not a huge fan of it. But ultimately, this is a provincial matter. And I could get the same thing if Mo had said, I don't like this, but ultimately it's a city matter. But when they start doing threats like, oh, we're going to withdraw funding, you're not going to get this provincial money, you're not going to get that provincial money, that's no longer, that is no longer just citing an opinion. It's equating to unrelated things to one another. Again, it would be different if it was, hey, the province has allocated, $10 million to help advertising the fossil fuel industry. I may disagree with that policy in general, but if they say, okay, because, we've allocated this money for advertising this specific industry, and obviously the city of Regina can't get a portion of it because they're saying no to it functionally.
Right.
But
this is a whole other thing.
Where you're
coerce.
I'm going to take away something over here that's completely unrelated to the issue as a punishment for what is very much just a municipal policy, like a municipal policy on what advertising is allowed on municipal buildings or in municipal spaces. That's unrelated to the ways that the province had decided to threaten the city. But my own sort of, I say, socialist type values sometimes end up falling prey to my vindictive streak when stuff like this happens, and just I have this overwhelming urge to start fighting for city policies within the city of Regina that really just say fuck the rest of the province. Then you know what? If the rest of the province is saying fuck Regina and fuck Saskatoon, and we hate the big cities,
then why should the cities care about them?
And like as much as oil and gas are economic drivers within the province, the major cities within the province are still the economic engines that drive that drive the province. It is there's still so many things where the rural parts of the province are net consumers. Net takers from the government trough compared to the cities that are net contributors. And you see that across, not just within the province, but everywhere. It really does seem the people who are most anti-socialist or most anti-collectivist tend to be from the areas that benefit from collectivism the most.
Right.
I don't understand that phenomenon myself, and I still want to believe in these things. I still want to believe that we are stronger when we work together. That
Yes, of course.
there is, collectivism makes everyone better off. There are, win-win situations. There are non-zero sum equations that work for the benefit of everyone.
Yeah.
But all of the people who would keep
bad.
insisting that that's not what they want, I kind of like, you know what? Let's have private roads. You want roads to not be government funded? Sure. Let's have each individual city pay for the roads that come to and from, and just not have roads in the parts of the province that can't afford to pay for their own roads anymore. You can't drive to the hospital anymore. You can only drive to the oil rig because the oil company paid for those roads.
Yeah.
I guess you can't go to the hospital anymore. I guess that sucks for you. Which obviously I don't actually want, but fuck do I get frustrated when stuff like this happens. When there was the issues with the libraries, that had me even more angry. That was, 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, but it was the same sort of thing where I'm like, you know what? Let's just have a rule. You can't take out books from the Regina City Library unless you're from the city of Regina. Let's stop having Regina taxes pay for people in Emerald Park and non-Regina cities to be able to come to the Regina libraries and get benefit from all of these services that the citizens of Regina pay for. And then I calm down and my temper fades and I'm like, you know what? No, it's not actually what I believe. And I actually believe in fighting for everyone. And it's not the fault. Yeah. It's not the fault of people who happen to live in conservative areas, who don't vote that way. Yeah. And we shouldn't punish them for the stupidity of their neighbors. But
you're on fire tonight already.
I am.
Usually I'm the one who's like, fuck these guys.
and again, this is just one of those ones that gets under my skin, where it is like people who don't live in the major metropolitan areas who keep wanting to dictate to the people who do. And it frustrates me across the board. But anyways, that's the story. I don't necessarily know if that was the wrong decision by the city council.
Right. Yeah, I don't know.
To backtrack, to do the research, like, hey, the cost is not worth it. Like I said, I think I mentioned this last week, having, influencing the companies and say, hey, we're not going to just blanket say no, but if you're going to advertise, here are some benchmarks we're going to need to see from you in order for, that sounds great to me. You know what? 10% of the energy that you generate has to be from ethical sources or non-fossil fuel related or whatnot, right? Like, encouraging energy companies within the province to transition to renewables, and encouraging them through allowing sponsorship from companies who do rather than those who don't. That's probably a better approach, because even if we can wean ourselves off fossil fuels, we're never going to wean ourselves off energy completely, because we literally need energy. Like, that's just
that's right. One of the concerns that I saw from some people on Twitter was kind of a concern that now whenever city council is trying to do something that's environmentally sound, or try to move to renewable resources in some way, then they're going to be pressured from outside sources to backtrack on those things as well, because, well, we don't want to piss off the big oil companies. We don't want to piss off the provincial government, and I think that's a genuine concern. I'm not a fan of my municipal government being afraid to do anything progressive because our provincial government is a bully.
Yep. But I don't disagree. I think that's certainly a concern. So we'll see. Where I think Sandra Masters, in one of her interviews, and she voted against it right from the beginning. She's been opposed this from the start. But one thing she talked about is, we're early in our mandate. We're gonna learn as we go. This was a learning experience for everyone, and that I agree with. I think folks are gonna figure this out. The right tends to be much, much better at death by 1,000 paper cuts than the left. Like, the left wants to do big, dramatic, visible action. And that, I think, gets the left in hot water. I think you run into issues where the center left keeps having to prove to the further left that they are on the same side. So they have to make things big and bold and visible. Whereas the center right has learned how to quietly convince the far right that they're on the same team, and then just slowly but surely strip away regulation, strip away reproductive rights, strip away all sorts of other things that the left likes, and keep them on the same page without it being big and bold. They talk the big, bold game, but they never actually implement the big, bold steps. So I think the left needs to get better at being sneaky.
Yeah, that's fair.
Right? Like just slowly, oh no, you know what? We're increasing our reliance on renewables from, 6% to 7%. That's not a big deal. And then just slowly implement that every year, as opposed to saying we plan on being, and again, I'm just picking random numbers from the air on this, but like, as opposed to saying we plan on being at 50% renewables by 2035. Like, don't say that out loud. Just slowly increase it by 2% per year. And eventually you're actually more likely to get there in the end because you won't get the pushback. But anyhow, it is what it is. Like I said, I don't necessarily think the final decision was the wrong decision. I'm very, very angry and frustrated by some of the steps that happened along the way to getting there.
Yep.
So any other thoughts you had on that? Okay, I guess we move on. All right.
Yeah, we can move on. Yeah, let's move on.
All right, that was a sad story or an angry story. Let's talk about the happy story, the one that just came out today.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. Pause.
I may be screwing over the momentum of the podcast by not leaving this for the end, but I think having some time to talk about the fact that we had a number of people step up within the city and organize a parade in support of Dr. Shahab, which I thought was awesome. They remained socially distanced while doing it. They stayed in their cars. They didn't completely undermine their own argument by gathering together in a large group, which I had this vision in my head when I first heard this was happening. Like, there's a big rally in support of Dr. Shahab. I really hope people aren't stupid when they're doing it, and it sounds like they were. So,
it sounds like they did it responsibly. So.
They did it responsibly and respectfully.
No, it's good. Okay.
One of the things. Sorry, go on.
I just was gonna say, like, I'm gonna admit my initial reaction to lionizing or placing somebody on a pedestal is don't do it.
Okay.
But he's had to deal with a lot of shit.
Yeah.
Over just trying to get us the right information.
And
so
if you look at the signs of the people in the parade, a couple of them said hero, and you're right. Like, lionizing is maybe not the best idea, but like they talk about things like thank you. Like, thank you just is a great word, but like, thank you for being respected, dedicated. Thank you for caring. Like, putting someone on a pedestal and thanking someone for the work they do
they're different
a
things.
Little different, right? And I think that makes a difference to me. One of the things I like, and I'll speak to one of the things I don't like. It drives me nuts when someone is attacked, whether it's Dr. Shahab, or when it's people attack at the Black Lives Matter movement, or whenever someone is attacked by shitty people, when moderates or centrists or whatever you want to call them come out and try and do the no true Scotsman and be like, oh, no, the province of Saskatchewan doesn't believe this. Don't worry, Dr. Shahab, we're not all like this. And it stops being about it becomes more about trying to defend the province rather than affirm the person who's attacked. This didn't have that feel to it, which I liked. And it instead of saying the province isn't like this, saying to the province, be better. Don't be like this, and saying to Dr. Shah, we do support you, not trying to say, oh, don't worry, no one actually doesn't like you. Like, no, let's acknowledge the fact that there are people out there who are being shitty to Dr. Shahab, partly based on paranoia, partly based on conspiracy theories. And I think we'd be blind to not acknowledge that it's partly based on racism.
Yeah.
So I think those are all key elements that, we still got to recognize that that's part of it. But in general, I love it. I love the fact that we had some NDP MLAs joining the parade. The premier tweeted out, I stand with Shahab. So it is sort of multi-partisan, bipartisan. Non-partisan, bipartisan. So that's good. I'm happy that, and I guess Dr. Shahab to some degree makes the perfect bipartisan or non-partisan guy, because I'm pretty sure has been appointed by the Conservatives. Like they were in government when he got his current job. But at this point, this is supporting medicine and supporting science seems to have become a left-wing thing when it comes to COVID. The left is equally bad about ignoring science in other things, but on this specific issue, the left has seemed to more align itself with the scientific consensus.
Yep. So. Yeah, they're on the right. The left is on the right side.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's the good news part.
Yes.
Where do we want to go from there? Or do you want to say more about that? I just talked a lot about it.
I don't have much else to say about it. Like I said my piece. If when people are saying somebody's a hero for doing their job, I often go, wow, maybe we shouldn't be doing that. But most of it, didn't look like it was too bad. And I like positive vibes, Yeah. I like it when people are being upbeat and happy and supportive for somebody in our province.
Yeah. So. No, I definitely agree with that. Do we want to go into Saskatoon's new rules for
Uber?
For Uber and Lyft and all of that? You're probably going to have a lot more understanding and knowledge on this one than I am, but...
Well, initially, because I've been talking about this for months, I got an alert with the understanding that it was the city council in Regina that was trying to impose these new rules.
Okay.
I'm trying to find the link so I can post it up in the video.
It was from the 29th.
Okay, 29th.
Is when the story came out.
There we go. All right. So this is what I was talking about, though, when I was talking about possibly needing cameras, possibly needing a specific number of licenses or a specific license that would cost more money for drivers. And no surprise, cab companies and cab drivers are the ones complaining about it being unfair. I'm not really going to weigh in one way or the other as to that. I see where they're coming from. I don't want to compete against other people who are struggling. Right. I think Uber is also a powerful company that has a lot of money to throw around and is probably going to do what they can to push this in whatever. I mean, Uber just defeated, it wasn't that long ago, they defeated a bill in California, and Saskatoon is not as powerful as the state of California. So,
the flip side is Saskatoon is not as powerful as the state of California. It's also not as important to Uber as the state of California.
That's true.
Yeah, if they spend money here or there, it'll be out of concern for the precedent rather than because they actually care.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, it's of course they don't care.
But they if anything, they'll care about the precedent. So
yeah, the Let's see. It says on Monday, counselors were provided with 12 different options for increased regulations, including placing a cap on the number of ride-hailing cars in the city, which I'm not entirely against because even in Regina, if you like anywhere you go, if you have too many suppliers, then each of them gets less customers or fewer customers.
Yeah.
Although, will that mean that customers get fewer restricted access when they need rides? Yeah. Unless you're forcing drivers to work a set number of hours per week, and then you're just talking about a job.
Yeah. Yeah.
It changes it like anytime all of the dynamics they want to change, it's going to change the entire, like all the regulations they want to add is going to change the entire dynamic of the app. So it has to. So I could see Uber actually putting a lot of effort into this, or if the regulations become too restrictive for them, then they will just pull out of the city of Saskatoon.
Yeah.
There are lots of cities within Canada that still don't have Uber. Saskatoon would just be another one of them.
Yeah. Well, Regina's only had it, 2 years now?
About a year.
Give or take? Yeah.
May of 2019, I think it was.
Okay. Yeah. No, I knew for sure it was 2019. So,
because I started right after it came to the city. I think 2 weeks or 3 weeks after it started.
Gotcha. So I don't know the answer myself. This is definitely one of those ones where I do know, like I think back, to the time before Uber, and it was a different world 20 years ago.
Right.
So obviously, but I remember that feeling of needing to take a cab to work and having to wait an hour.
Yeah. And not being sure it was going to show up.
And not being sure it was going to show up, right? Because we didn't have an app. Now, again, I think modern day taxi companies have, I don't know if they have switched the app, because I haven't taken a taxi in forever. I just don't bother because it's so much easier to take an Uber, which I guess I understand why the taxi companies are upset.
Yeah.
But this is that thing where people like the things they're used to. And if the pre-existing businesses had adapted to the changing world soon enough, they wouldn't be having these issues. If cab companies had switched to having an app that let you track the cabs, we wouldn't have Uber. People would then just still be taking cabs. But 20 years ago, I think even 10 years ago, if you wanted to take a cab,
there was no app.
You phoned someone, you waited on hold maybe for 30 seconds. You may have even waited on hold for 45 minutes. You get a really rude and disrespectful person who treats you like shit, who, treats you like an inconvenience.
Yep.
You let them know when and where you need the cab. And if they say, sure, fine, and we'll hang up on you without giving you any information. If you stop them and ask, can you let me know roughly how long that will be? They would say, somewhere between 5 and 45 minutes. And when the cab gets there, they won't come ring your doorbell or anything like that. You have no way of knowing. So you need to sit in your window and look, or if you're in an apartment, go downstairs and wait outside or wait in the lobby. And so you're waiting for maybe 5 minutes, maybe for 45. And then an hour passes and you phone and you ask, hey, the cab still hasn't come yet. And the person you're speaking to isn't actually the dispatcher, right? So they don't actually know. So they'll guess, it'll be there any minute. And then 20 minutes later, you phoned back. Though they said they came and no one was there. And no one phoned me. But that was the cab experience 10, 20 years ago.
And that's not just an anecdotal account.
No,
right? That's literally
that's happened to be more
I've
times than I can count, right? And then you go, okay, well, I need to make it to the and that's different when it's 2:30 and 2:30 a.m. You're outside the bar. You know what? You kind of have to plan for that 2:30 a.m.
Yeah.
outside the bar. But this would be like 3:00 in the afternoon. I was a university student, 3:00 in the afternoon, done classes and needed to go to my part-time job.
Yeah.
And now I'm late for work because of a cab, and like these things snowball. And like, okay, I need to go to the airport, so I'm going to phone in advance. And again, you're hit or miss if they're going to show up half hour early and you're not ready, and then they just leave and you have to call a second cab, or they are late. Like, and not always. It wasn't always bad service, but it certainly wasn't as consistent as Uber. And even when you got good service, sometimes you were again at 3:00 in the afternoon waiting an hour.
Yeah.
And I've never had those issues with Uber or Lyft.
As a driver, like I say, that's every single passenger that I've had. And I have taken over 950 trips with passengers. Mm-hmm. So that's almost 1,000 different people that have all said, I will never go back to cabs. The service I had was awful. I had to wait for an hour. I got stranded outside of this place. I didn't get a ride. Like, if you want to, like, it's okay that I get that the drivers and the companies are frustrated that they have to compete with Uber. I get that. But if you want to compete, then you have to provide a service that people are going to be drawn to.
Yeah. And like I said, I would actually rather support a salaried employee who gets benefits for what they're doing. I'd rather support someone who is not a quote unquote independent contractor. I'd rather support someone who, but even it's not like the taxis had a lot of that too. A lot of them were considered independent contractors as well. The cab companies worked in a very similar, exploitive manner to Uber and Lyft. It was a slightly different business model, but it was no less exploitive. Yeah. And there was issues with these permanent taxi licenses. And this, I remember talking to I think this was again 20 years ago, so who knows what it's like today, but talking to a cab driver who didn't own his own license. He was like, there was a cab license and someone else owned that cab license, and he was paying them to drive during the hours when the other guy didn't want to or couldn't. Like he was saying, like, I'm hoping to eventually one day save up and buy my own taxi license, which will then be an investment because I'm going to save up. I think at the time, again, a million years ago, like $250,000 or $300,000 to save up to buy this license, which you would then hopefully, sell for $500,000 someday. I got to imagine those have bottomed out since the advent of Uber and Lyft. Like, that completely undercuts those values because of why the hell would you want a taxi license at this point?
Right. I mean, when I first started Uber, I followed the Uber news pretty closely. Mm-hmm. And there was a New York Times podcast episode and article that came out around that time about New York City.
Yeah.
And because they have
I can only imagine
the gold medallions that are they auction off for, like, they have like a select number of them. They auction them off for like $2 million.
Yep.
To drive a fucking cab in New York City, and now you're competing with somebody who just needed to fill out a form and get a background check on an app. Yep. And I mean, the system sucked.
Yeah, and like New York and London, England, might be some of the only places I would consider getting a cab, because I know in those two cities there are such rigid rules around, like, there's these taxi exams where, like, more complex than like master's level university final exams, where they have to memorize every single road in the entire city and the best routes to get where they're going and all of that. Like, it was super intense from everything I've heard about them. But even then, at the same time, that's a lot of education around something that an app can do probably just as well. Because I don't care how well you know a city, there's a little GPS on someone's phone probably is going to do it better in 2021.
Yep.
So, and like I said, those would be the only two that I might consider.
Yeah. It is pretty rare that the GPS on Google Maps doesn't have the fastest route.
Yeah.
I often, I mean, I know a lot of the places into the city off by heart now,
Yeah.
but I still look at the map because the route that they have from the location I'm at to the location I'm going to is often better than the one I can construct in my head instantly.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, and in Regina, it's not like Regina's not quite big enough for this to take effect, but like in larger centers, the ability of Google Maps to take into account traffic issues is huge. I remember this was going back several years ago. I was going through the States, and we had done that once before, and the second year we did it, I paid whatever it was to have roaming data, so I could use my Google Maps better. Because the first time I did it, I printed off a bunch of maps and shit. Right. And I remember it paid for itself as we drove through Chicago, because we were driving along, and all of a sudden I got a little notification ping up on the phone that said, there's been an accident. The route you're taking is now going to be 2.5 hours longer than when you originally picked it. Right. I can't remember their wording, but it was basically like there were two different ways to get from where you are to where you're going. This one took 15 minutes longer, so we told you to do this one, the second one. But now that second one's 2.5 hours longer, so this one saves you 2 hours and 15 minutes. Do you want to switch? I'm like, yes, you have now paid for yourself, because you just got me 2 hours less in rush hour Chicago traffic. Like, done, sold, pays for itself, right? And again, that's that whole, like, the Uber drivers will have that. And I hope cab drivers are now starting to do that as well. I would hope that, but like they're playing catch up. And again, if they had been ahead of the curve, and this is again what capitalism is supposed to do, right? If they had been ahead of the curve, they would have started doing these things first. And now you have a new upstart doing these things. So the cab companies are being forced to adapt and compete. Like, again, this is at the macro level. Capitalism does drive innovation at times. So again, I don't know. I still want I don't want Uber to be regulated to benefit cab companies. I want Uber to be regulated so that the drivers aren't treated like garbage. Yeah.
I mean, the reason that I look at it and go, okay, well, maybe they should limit the number of drivers is because if you limit the number of drivers, each driver who's on there can make more. Even if I am one of the people who doesn't get his license because I didn't get in early enough or whatever, like that's one of those things that benefits the actual workers that are doing the job.
Yeah. And there's a trade-off because it hurts the consumer. And it hurts the consumer. But it hurts the consumer's ability to exploit the worker, right? Because essentially it is exploitive to have an Uber driver just sitting around not getting paid,
waiting for you
at the beck and call. So,
and hopefully you could have a balance there, right?
Yeah.
Where you have the right number so that you maximize the number of people who can access it. And
what I'd love
it's never
to
going to be perfect, but
what I'd love to see is something in place like that. Idle time is still compensated, but like Uber is required to compensate for idle time.
That would be,
or say like if your income over the course of X period of time doesn't reach minimum wage, you're at least supplemented up to minimum wage. This, of course, is with the understanding I think minimum wage should be higher.
Right. The interesting thing, like I know that Uber can, because they did it at the very start when it was in the city, they can guarantee you a certain wage. Where if you don't make enough trips to get that wage, then you will get paid X number of dollars. They did it for the first 2 months that we had Uber in the city. They guaranteed us $20 an hour on certain dates and times. So you made sure you drove during those times.
Yep. And like, again, even if it's not, even if it isn't $20 an hour, if it, wherever it falls, I don't have a problem. In fact, I think cities should do that. And again, a net of minimum wage, and again, a net so that you're minus mileage and gas, right? So probably does work. My guess is it probably does actually work close to $20 when you do a net minimum wage because you're bringing into account your own costs. But yeah, again, it's this idea that it's this phenomenon where people who aren't business owners get treated like business owners. Because if you're driving an Uber, you're
Right.
not really a business owner.
Yeah.
It's we have a lot of this mentality that came out within multi-level marketing, where you tell a bunch of people who are in a pyramid scheme that they're a business owner, and they're not. I think the same thing is happening with Uber. Is they found a loophole where instead of having to follow workplace guidelines, having to treat their employees, because they really functionally are employees. So instead of having to treat employees at the bare minimum that labor laws require, you say, oh, well, we're going to magically pretend they're not employees. We're going to call them independent contractors, so we don't actually have to follow the labor laws for employees. I think that's exploitive, and that's something that, should obviously be dealt with. But
yeah, we'll see.
We'll see.
As far as
I also still want to be able to pop on my app and have a car show up at my house in under 10 minutes. So,
and the thing is, like, as an Uber driver, I want to be able to turn that Uber app on and off as I wish.
Yeah.
And there are some of these things are going to change that.
Yeah.
As far as the dash cams, everybody can get an app that's free on your phone.
Yeah.
so that you have a front facing camera and a rear facing camera, so that you can be covered. Just put your phone in a good spot so you can see everything.
Or buy a $20 webcam.
Yeah, I'm sure. You could get one for a decent price. That's
not much. I don't know how that works as far as plugging one into your phone goes. And like, if you want to get more expensive, get a Bluetooth one, it'll be more expensive. But just the type that can plug into a computer are not that much, and will drop once COVID ends, because there's a run on them because of everyone being in Zoom meetings.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, I bought one for work that I just bought out of my own pocket, and it wasn't very expensive because I wanted to have a better camera when I was meeting with clients. Anyways, that's the story of that. I don't know if you want to talk about this, because I didn't watch it, and I'm obviously not going to watch a video while you and I are doing this right now. But there was that Advanced Regina story that was, and again, I guess we're going back a little bit to talk about the Regina City Council issue, because I think it's related to that. But it seemed like there was
it's super fishy, fucking
pretty weird shit going on when it comes to this Advanced Regina group.
We can watch this ad if you want. I can share, or at least to some extent. Like, we don't have to watch the whole thing.
Sure.
But here, let's get the M off of the front of that. We'll start it over. Okay. Okay. Normally when I do streaming videos, like me and Renee, my friend, we have been doing a critique of PragerU videos. So we'll just watch a little bit and then stop and chat. And I was going to let this play all the way through, but my goodness, I can't do it.
It's fair. Yeah.
Like, it opens saying the Regina City Council is in danger of being overrun by radical leftists.
I wish.
The world, it would be so much better if everybody that was accused of being a radical leftist.
Like, I don't think I am a radical leftist, but I kind of actually would prefer a few more of them in power.
Yeah, at least a balance in some way.
Yeah.
So
it kind of again, I don't want to go back to the story itself all that much, but it kind of speaks to, like, I don't know, has Regina made the big time that we're getting weird, creepy YouTube ads?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we are now the big time. We successfully reached propaganda levels.
Because like this isn't sort of like a small little like it's shitty in its content, but like this is professionally made. This isn't just
Yeah.
some guy in his basement, and they're paying to do targeted Facebook ads. And
Okay, so let's say we're not going to watch the rest of the video, but
okay,
this is a Facebook page that only has 16 likes.
okay, so maybe it's not big time.
Their Twitter account, like they have a website, advanceregina.ca. Don't go there. It's yeah, I don't know. They have a Twitter account. I can't remember how many Twitter followers they have, but it's not very many. A friend of mine, he took a look. He tried to find out where this was coming from, and
yeah, okay, that has me curious as well. Like, where's the money to pay for all of this coming from?
well, it has to be some energy
I would
company,
think
right?
so, right? But like I did go to their website. There's very little there. They don't have any information about who they are.
Yeah, it's
super thin, and it looks like it was created purely to do this one ad. Like there's very little to it other than just this
one thing, this one issue.
And again, they don't say who they are. It's really weird. But also, even like their rhetoric, like, did we not learn things from the U.S. Where you start talking about going after city councilors and talking about we need to put city council on notice? It's clear this new city council needs to be put on notice. Like,
okay, this is the funny thing too. Like lumping energy companies with cannabis, tobacco, and pornography. Okay, so I don't remember anybody comparing those.
No, that's because they are though. That is what's happening. Because those are the three categories that aren't allowed to be advertised currently. So the proposed, I don't even think it's a law, but like the proposed motion was to have oil and gas advertising in the same category as cannabis, tobacco, and pornography advertising. So, but again, we very loosely define what counts as pornography.
Right.
I understand why we don't allow tobacco advertising. I actually don't have that much of a problem with that one.
I'm not entirely sure why we allow why is alcohol a restricted one as well? Like why is cannabis in there?
I think alcohol's fine.
So then cannabis should be fine, I would think.
Yeah, it should be, but it's not. And like, obviously, I don't think we should be showing pornographic material on the side of a bus. Like
nobody thinks that's a good idea, right?
It's sort of like that's consuming the product publicly rather than just advertising the product publicly. But again, we have a province that doesn't allow strip clubs where people can act consensually and like, So again, it's these people who believe in free market right-wing ideals right up until it butts up against their own personal sense of socially conservative morality. So
I love this line, the ideological attack on the hardworking people of the energy sector. That's not what I got from it. It was a genuine attempt to, figure out whether or not advertising for oil energy companies was a good idea.
So, but
this again, is a really shitty framing, but
but again, this idea, and again, it's the calling, and they don't explicitly call for violence against city councilors. So I don't want to have an issue of me libeling or slandering them by saying they're explicitly calling for violence against city council. But the idea of having people, in the environment that exists in the world today, some of the language they use is pretty sketchy.
Yeah.
You and I are pretty anti Scott Moe and anti Sask Party at times, but I would never use some of the language that they use about the Regina City Council, both in the ad and on their website, regarding Scott Moe. Like I would never talk about Scott Moe in that manner. So
yeah, they try to frame this statement as an outrageous statement against Scott Moe. This Mr. Moe should stay in his lane and out of municipal politics. This is so I don't see how that's. I don't know. I don't know what else to say about it except
and I didn't want to spend too much time on it, and because we covered a lot of that at the beginning, but
yeah.
I thought discussing that specific organization and some of their language is pretty.
It is interesting to me that Saskatchewan has reached Republican campaign propaganda levels of advertising.
Yeah.
So
you see a lot of Sask Party supporters with Trump flags on their pickup trucks. So
it's true. And before the U.S. election, I did actually see somebody with a MAGA hat in Superstore in, I believe it was the East End.
Yep.
So
we're not immune to it here.
No, and there's lots of trucks with stickers and
Yep. So what else do we want to touch base at all on the COVID spending in the province?
Sure.
There was the report that came out where there's a $1.4 billion in contingency funds that are supposed to be getting spent on dealing with COVID it was mostly an unallocated infrastructure. And there's 160 million left in the COVID fund. So there's a bunch of money for a bunch of things that just aren't getting spent on the things they're supposed to be getting spent on.
Yeah. So what is he doing? Like just nothing? Like sitting on his hands? Like, I mean, I keep using that same phrase on Twitter and on Facebook. He's sitting on his hands doing nothing, waiting till this all blows over. Like, I don't know. I'm just so disappointed in him as like the premier of our province, and I just wish he wasn't.
Yeah. So, and it goes on. Other highlights include, the federal government contributing more for COVID, healthcare, and education. So the federal government is contributing, and the province just isn't matching or spending the way they're supposed to.
Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah.
And it seems like so many of these things, like other provinces are doing it badly as well at times. Alberta specifically comes up a lot, but Saskatchewan seems to be actually in a lot of these things being even worse than Alberta.
We are one of the worst.
Yeah, well, and for COVID itself, per capita, we are the worst.
Yeah, that's right.
So like we are doing the worst of any province when it comes to the disease itself, but which I guess translates, translates into the money being spent as well. If we're not spending money that's allocated towards dealing with this, it makes sense that it's not getting dealt with.
Yeah, one of the interesting things I saw, I don't know if I found the link for it in this, but a significant percentage of the population of Saskatchewan actually said that they think that we could have more restrictions and it would be good. So we could have a stronger reaction to COVID, and you wouldn't, I mean, your anti-mask protesters are going to be loud no matter what, but
yeah. So, well, especially with these new strains coming out, it'll be interesting to see what happens between now and when.
There it is.
When vaccination occurs.
Well, and we're a little behind on that because Apparently, all of Canada is a little behind on that. They say it's going to take us a while to, at the current rate, it's going to take us a very long time to get everybody vaccinated. But yeah. So majority of Sask residents say COVID restrictions don't go far enough. So 2 out of 3 Saskatchewan respondents. I don't know. 1,500 people surveyed, and with 67% said the rules are insufficient.
And 25 said they are about right. So that leaves us with what, 8% that say they are too far?
Yeah, the loudest 8%.
9% they said, 9% say they go too far. So there's rounding because that adds up to 101%. But
those are the people you're arguing with on Facebook. Those are the people in the Reddit. Those are the people protesting. Mm-hmm. At this point,
the flip side, only 56% of the province said they're going to get vaccinated. So there's good news and bad news in that study.
Yeah. Wow. No, that's not good. What do we do?
Yeah. So
the 67% who think the restrictions don't go far enough, and the should be the same group that says they will get vaccinated.
You'd think.
What's happening there?
Again, so much of this comes down to identity rather than science, right? You have anti-vax, like the social distance supporters and the mask supporters tend to, like the anti-maskers and the anti-social distancers tend to be pretty consistently on the right end of the spectrum. The anti-vaccine folks come from both the right and the left.
Yeah, that's true.
So again, I think you have a number of people whose identities are pretty heavily entwined with the anti-vaccine movement. COVID just isn't deadly enough for that to be overcome.
I guess, yeah.
So that's
they're worried, but they're not worried enough.
I also do hope that as more and more people are vaccinated, that number does start to go up.
Ideally.
So we'll see. I think a lot of people are scared because it's so early on and they don't think it's been tested enough. So that's it. Like, again, for the both sides, or the two sides to every story. A lot of people are angry that this hasn't been tested enough. But I had someone online the other day talking about how awful Trudeau is and how awful the federal government is and how we shouldn't have tested as much as we did and how these vaccines should have been approved for use way quicker without nearly as much testing.
Okay.
Yeah. They were doing if Trudeau had been in charge during World War II, we would have lost because he wouldn't have done anything. With this idea that, testing the vaccine for the extra month or not approving things that have been approved other places as quickly as they were approved other places. So you definitely do have people on both sides of that piece of it. But yeah, the idea that only 56% think we should be that said that they are going to go get vaccinated is mind-boggling.
I'm not a fan of that number.
No. But again, it's one of those things where both the, as it seems so frequently, the people who want more restrictions on want more restrictions and are most likely to get vaccinated are people who live in the urban centers.
Right.
Urban center, like for the calls for more restrictions in large urban centers are 77%. Of respondents within the major urban centers think we should have more restrictions. So up from 67% province-wide.
We are approaching, we're at an hour now.
Yeah. So.
So we could cut it off soon. I want to go over a little bit of feedback we got.
Let's do that. So we talked about COVID. We can switch to feedback.
We only got one comment on the YouTubes. So
okay.
I want to share this with you. Our friend Homefire at Homefire Sask on Twitter does the show True North Radio on YouTube. Said, I'm appreciating this. 2 points I love to hear. How exploitative deregulation in trucking and transport remains, dehumanizing to workers and in total disregard for public safety. Also a good point about bad behavior being rewarded in sports, and evil corporate lawyers are rewarded too. So that was we talked about the Humboldt Broncos driver crash situation. And
did we talk about bad behavior being rewarded in sports? I don't remember that piece of it.
I think that was part of the analogies and comparisons.
Okay. I'm like, I need to listen to what I say more often.
Yeah, that's right. But I always appreciate some feedback from at Homefire Sask, Homefire SK.
That's awesome. Yeah, I also try to remember, when did I talk about evil corporate lawyers? I actually have a lot of sympathy for lawyers. They're doing their job.
Yes, some definitely are.
I guess they pick and choose who they work for, but once they're working for someone.
I've developed a soft spot for defense lawyers. The propaganda that I consumed as a youth and over my, I guess, early adulthood, often portrayed defense lawyers as the bad guys, trying to get those guilty criminals off. And now I just see it as like they're trying to get defendants their human rights to a fair trial.
Yeah. Even prosecutors,
often
the fact that they get lumped in with cops, I think is bad. Like, I think, like, yeah. And I think sometimes they bring it on themselves. Like, again, this is going to the U.S., but like the Kamala Harris issue where she called herself the top cop. I think that was bad word choice on her part. And I understand why she did it, because she needed to do it to appeal to the more centrist folks within her party. But like, she was not a cop. Prosecuting attorney is not a police officer, period. Right. They are like, as long as we have a justice system, that is a role that like is vital and critical and needs to be filled. And we could, if this was a podcast about more American politics, I would go into a lot more defense of Harris. But in general, lawyers have a job to do, and it's an important one.
Exactly. Yeah, I recently spoke to Alex Vitale, the author of the book The End of Policing. Yeah. And he said, like, he isn't anti, like, he's got a lot of problems with policing, obviously. and
as do I. So.
and he talked about getting more progressive prosecuting attorneys in places in the U.S. And I'm sure there are plenty of progressive ones here. I don't think our system is quite as flawed as the U.S.
No. But it's
not great. Not going to give us a lot of props there, but no. And on YouTube, sorry.
Yeah, no. We're doing the feedback thing.
On YouTube, Das Richard said on it was our video, not the last video, but the one before. Okay. He said that the minimum wage should be $25. And
all right.
I'm not going to argue with that. I know there's actually a lot of people in some leftist circles that I'm engaged in that are of the opinion that that's nonsense and would crash the economy. But I disagree with those people.
Yeah.
So,
like, it's one of those ones where there is probably a point where if you cross that certain line with minimum wage, it does become too high. I don't know if $25 is it, and I haven't bothered to find out or haven't bothered to look into it, because it's like saying, if everyone was given a free pet ferry, would that cause issues with pet control? Like, it's irrelevant because it's not on the horizon. Like, there's no point in worrying about whether $25 is going to crash the economy, because we are so far from having a $25 minimum wage that there's no point in worrying about what that would do to the economy. Let's talk about what $15 minimum wage would do to the economy, which is boosted. Right? Like, we should have been at $15 minimum wage more than a decade ago. At this point, $15 minimum wage is
still too low.
It's still too low.
We could start the campaign for $25 minimum wage right now. Yeah. And by the time we get it, it will be too low. So that's where that is.
But it's interesting. Like, I was under the impression, and I guess this is that thing where the whole left-right spectrum is bullshit and isn't a real thing. But wasn't this the same person who thought we were just a bunch of radical lefties talking nothing but left-wing talking points?
No, he was the one who commented about us being wrong on royalties.
Yes, misrepresenting royalties.
Yeah, so
which is fair, because again, I did a gross simplification on royalties rather than getting into the nuts and bolts of it.
He is a conservative person in general, but he has a lot of progressive ideas and does actually he's very pro-worker, like so.
Okay. Yes, sorry. That's this is I guess this still relates to a Saskatchewan political issue. Going back to and we talked about the pipeline last week, but the one thing all of a sudden, the number of conservatives who have become so incredibly pro-union within the last 2 weeks is unbelievable. People who a month earlier were talking about how all unions are parasites and unions will be the destruction, and unions were useful in the 30s, but they're no longer needed and they're garbage and awful, and how destructive unions are. All of a sudden, the day after Keystone XL was vetoed
but what about the union workers?
It's all of a sudden the unions are the most important thing in the world. And these are union jobs. I think I've heard the term union jobs by conservatives more in the last 2 weeks than I have heard the phrase union jobs from leftists in the previous 2 years. It is remarkable how all of a sudden union jobs are the sacred cow of the conservative movement in Saskatchewan and Alberta, and in the U.S. within the oil industry. It is remarkable how all of a sudden they've seen the light on how wonderful and amazing unions are. And again, because in honor of today's commitment to sarcasm, I am 100% certain this commitment to seeing how important union jobs will certainly stay true and stay consistent going forward. And they certainly will not all of a sudden backtrack on that as soon as this Keystone XL issue has passed.
Yeah. No, of course not.
Yeah.
They genuinely care about unions.
Yeah, all of a sudden, yes. All of a sudden, unions are super important to them, and union jobs are super important to them, and that will not fade at all.
Yeah. All right.
Drinking some water.
I think we can start closing out the show.
Awesome.
So if you want to find us, you can go to anchor.fm/FromManyPeoples. You can leave us a voicemail there if you want. Our Twitter is @SKPoliticsPod. Our Facebook is facebook.com/FromManyPeoplesStrengthPod. And our email is FromManyPeoples@gmail.com.
Yay!
Thanks for joining me.
Well, thanks once again, Cory. It was I think I needed to get some things off my chest.
It was a good venting episode.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's the cliche, a middle-aged white guy will have a podcast prior to going to therapy.
Well, I mean, if I could afford therapy, I would.
I do go to therapy, but this still lets me get things off my chest. My therapist doesn't want to hear my thoughts on Saskatchewan politics. So
right. See? Yeah. They'll be all like, but what about your life? What's going on in your life?
No, let me tell you why I'm angry about rural Saskatchewan.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Well, thank you for letting me have time on my my weekend.
Second therapy.
Have second therapy on Sunday evenings to talk about Saskatchewan politics.
You see my old man keyboard and this is what happens when you turn 40.
Yeah. I'm going to hold perfectly still while we're doing this so that when you edit it, it doesn't look like as big of a jump.
Yeah. Okay. So there's this video. I don't think I'm sharing audio. Hey.
We'll fix it in post.
I'll get it. Don't worry, youngins. I'll figure this out.
In my day,
we couldn't even share videos on the internet.
If we wanted to see a commercial we missed, we had to wait an entire week till the show was on again.
Yeah, that's right. All right. So